Still with us, former governor of Pennsylvania and now NBC News political analyst and sports writer Ed Rendell, and Mike Barnicle is still
So we're
with
going
us.
to be in Chicago on the 11th,
Yes.
and David Axelrod is going to be there.
Maybe he'll take us to Manny's, his favorite deli in Chicago.
No,
We're going to
RL.
RL.
Where'd RL?
I'm going to Ditka's. I'm sorry.
Are you really?
Dick is
Yeah.
good.
That's good stuff.
Willie
You can
I'm
go
sure
there, too.
RL is very nice,
We'll go the
but-
night before.
booked Blago.
Was that hard?
Close personal friends. No, and he agreed to waive his fee, which I thought was very nice.
Innocent of all
Sweet of
charges,
him.
Blago.
He is.
Now, is he walking around the streets of Chicago now? He's
Of course
free
he
man.
is.
Sure he is.
23 out of 24 couldn't stick to him, those charges. He's clean, baby.
Hey, you know what? Right there.
Exactly.
I love America.
Wow.
Only in America, as Don King would say. Only in America. So that's going to be great. And
Yeah.
the night before, Mike Barnicle, a very special event for your dear friend Tim Russell.
They're honoring Tim Russell at an event in Chicago on the night of February 10th, and we will all be there.
I look
All right.
forward to that.
Very good.
All right, let's get to the news. We have a lot going on in terms of the health care debate, which is being reignited by a certain judge in Florida, as well as a potential Republican candidate out of an office as ambassador to China, resigning. We'll get to that in just a moment. But first, Egypt. More than 250,000 people have reportedly flooded into the heart of Cairo this morning. You're looking at live pictures of Cairo, where organizers have called for a 1 million-strong march. Egypt's army has pledged not to fire on protesters, saying they recognize the, quote, legitimacy of the people's demands. Earlier today, a coalition of opposition groups reportedly said they will only begin talks with the Egyptian government once embattled President Mubarak steps down. Mohammed El Baradei, who is emerging as a key figure in the uprising, also reiterated his call for Mubarak to leave the country today if he, quote, wants to save his skin.
Wow.
Oh,
He's kind of amping up the rhetoric.
Okay. Meanwhile, the State Department says it expects to fly some 1,400 Americans out of Egypt after evacuating more than 1,200 already. Yesterday, the State Department sent retired diplomat Frank Wisner to Cairo, where he is now holding high-level meetings with officials there.
Governor, other than El Baradei's, I think, unfortunate comments regarding the saving of Mubarak's own skin, it does seem, if you listen to Brian Williams' reports, Aaron Burnett's reports on the show earlier, that these crowds are peaceful, and we may be moving toward a manageable solution in Egypt.
yeah, I think a manageable solution, Joe, except for the big question mark is who's going to put together the government after Mubarak? You know, the old joke about what's behind door two.
Right.
And that's the biggest problem because there are no political parties, real political parties in Egypt. If there's going to be an election, political parties have to be formed, leaders have to emerge. There's going to have to be a legitimate transition period, probably not with Mubarak at the helm, but maybe with the vice president at the helm, to give time. I understand their elections were called for September.
Right.
Yeah, well, they're scheduled.
That might be the right time to do it because it'll give the chance to build a political hierarchy. But right now, who knows what's going to emerge there, and that's the big X factor.
Well, that is what happens when there's a void, if opportunists swarm. Jordan's royal palace says the king has dismissed his government in the wake of domestic protests over the country's economy and lack of political freedoms. King Abdullah's move comes after 2 weeks of widespread protests inspired by the revolt in Tunisia. Demonstrators had been calling for the resignation of Jordan's prime minister, who is blamed for a rise in fuel and food prices.
And the situation, of course, is a great threat to governments all across the Mideast.
Yeah.
In Jordan, you have a king who's popular, but they just don't have the economic wherewithal that, say, Egypt does or Saudi Arabia. So it is going to be a difficult situation. I mean, it's amazing. This all spread from a guy getting
Slapped across the face.
Amazing.
a street vendor getting slapped across the face in a remote part of Tunisia.
But you know,
it
Joe,
spread to Cairo and is now igniting across the Middle East.
And of course, that's a tribute to the modern communications. That would never have happened 20, 25 years ago. But you know, the interesting thing about life imitating art, well, life does imitate art. Do you remember the movie Syriana?
Yes.
Syriana made the point, I thought, incredibly well, that unless these countries start doing something to create economic opportunity for their citizens, it's a powder keg waiting to explode.
Oh, you can see just in the past 3 days what we've known all along. Liberty is both infectious and volatile. And you have a group of countries, Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Syria, Algiers, huge numbers of very young people looking at the future with no hope, no job, no money. That is a fuse that once it starts burning, can just burn throughout the entire region.
I had members of my family a couple months ago were in Egypt just on vacation, and their guide who lived there his whole life said 2/3 of our population is under the age of 30. He said, this is coming. Keep your eye on Egypt, and sure enough, here it is about 2 months later. When you mix youth and frustration together, you're going to get scenes like we're seeing here.
Is that Willie, where you get the reports that we're Morning Joe's pretty big in Cairo?
Huge in Cairo.
Huge. They love it.
They do, actually. We're on in Cairo.
It's crazy.
It's all about us.
No, it is. It is, seriously.
The average age, you know what the median age is in Afghanistan?
17.
17 years, 0.8 months.
17.
It is a demographic time bomb.
What's our median age these days? I'm serious.
84.
73.
84. No, we're,
35.
like Europe, we keep aging. Yeah. And these other regions across the world getting younger.
All right, other news to cover this morning. The Justice Department says it will appeal the ruling of a federal judge in Florida declaring the Obama administration's health care overhaul unconstitutional. Yesterday, Judge Roger Vinson shot down the plan. Toward the end of his 78-page ruling, the judge used President Obama's own position from the 2008 campaign. Then Senator Obama said, quote, here's the concern. If you haven't made it affordable, how are you going to enforce a mandate? I mean, if a mandate was the solution, we can try that to solve homelessness by mandating everyone to buy a house. In response to the ruling, the White House said this ruling is well out of the mainstream of judicial opinion. We don't believe this kind of judicial activism will be upheld, and we are confident that the Affordable Care Act will ultimately be declared constitutional by the courts. Reaction fell largely along party lines.
Okay, very good. So what do you think? I don't want to play that quote. I don't want to play that side. He just throws rhetorical bombs. Why are you putting that in news? Seriously.
So Governor tells the story.
Governor, let's talk about the political fallout here. What does it mean? Who's the winner? Are the Republicans the winner, or does this get a chance for Barack Obama to get it right the second time in litigating health care?
Well, sure. And as Mike said off camera, we did a terrible job, starting with the president all the way down to Democrats throughout the country, in explaining health care. For example, no one explained to the American people why you need a mandate financially to make it work to include everybody in the system. It's a crucial part of the bill, and it was never explained to the American people.
Same thing with the public option. The president never explained. Democrats never explained. I don't think adequately.
Absolutely.
That if you don't have the public option, then this is just a big giveaway to insurance companies.
Absolutely.
And that's what it ended up being, a big giveaway to insurance companies. John Shattuck, very conservative guy, said, if I knew this is where we were going to end up, where insurance companies get this mandate, I may have voted for a public option. He said that as a very conservative guy in a very conservative Arizona district.
Can I ask the two of you a question, because you've both been in the ring, in the electoral ring, and it is this. We had Congressman Connie Mack on a couple of weeks ago. Recall that?
Yeah, I know.
And he was asked during the course of the interview, he calls it Obamacare, would he be willing, he wants to throw out Obamacare, as many Republicans seemingly want to do, would he be willing to throw out pre-existing condition, taking care of children, portability? And he said, yes, throw it all out. Can the Republican Party go forward with a policy like that, throwing everything out with no... what's the alternative that they have?
They may be able to do that. I don't think it'd be politically popular among independents in the Philadelphia suburbs in 12. But the bigger question is, can we as a country move forward without a reasonable health care policy? I don't think this health care plan is a good health care plan to build upon over the next 20 years. Governor, it might be good, not only for Republicans, but for Democrats, for the president, if we scrap it, start all over again, and talk about the things you've been talking about this morning.
Joe, I agree if you assume that the system's going to act responsibly. But Willie and I were talking, if they scrap it, let's say at the beginning of next year, we're going to blow a year just on pure politics. Nobody's going to sit down and try to compromise. The problem for Republicans is the only part of the health care bill that's coming into law right now are the popular parts.
Right.
Getting rid of the pre-existing condition.
Your
the
kids
till
under 26.
The $250 to the Medicaid.
By the way, can we raise it to 34? I don't know if that's going to hold for my kids.
So all of a sudden, people are starting to warm a little bit to it.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, if this thing's declared unconstitutional, those things go away.
Governor, though, you know, because you were governor of a very large state, that if you look at the budget crisis facing Pennsylvania, New York, California, the United States of America, it centers on health care. Over the next 30 years, even with this reform package, the numbers don't add up.
No question. Look, the entitlements have to be looked at. And the best part of the health care bill is it did look and cut into Medicare as a way of financing this. And I think that was a good proposal because the thing it got rid of was another boondoggle to the managed care organizations, the way we save money on the Medicare side. So, look, should we start all over again? As in the Palace of Truth and Justice, that would be good. But I don't think it's politically feasible because I think we've got a presidential election coming down the pike, and we're not going to be able to take this on responsibly.
Well, especially given that there is an election coming up, I'm not sure that would be helpful for either side. And speaking of the election coming up in 2 years, the U.S. ambassador to China, Republican Jon Huntsman, has sent a resignation letter to President Obama in possible preparation for a presidential bid against his boss. While the former Utah governor has declined to comment on his political aspirations, associates say he has had several conversations with advisors who are waiting to see if he decides to run. But yesterday, Robert Gibbs would not speculate on Huntsman's plans.
I want to be clear on this from up here. I've talked to several people in the building, and I have not heard anybody say they know what the future holds for Ambassador Huntsman, except to say, as I said earlier, that he will leave sometime in the first part of the year.
So talk about Governor Huntsman, Ambassador Huntsman. You know him. Tell us about him.
Well, he's a terrific guy. He's moderate in his personal tone, which I think is very, very important.
You like him, though?
I do like him.
Intelligent
he's a very
guy?
likable guy. He's smart, and he looks at problems from a pragmatic standpoint.
So he's not a rabid ideologue.
No, and I think he would be a great general election candidate. I'm not sure he wears well in those primaries where they want red meat. He's not a red meat type of guy.
No.
Does he have that piece of DNA?
Fire in the belly? I'm not sure. That's a very good question. You have to run for anything, but especially to run for president, you have to have that fire in the belly. I'm not sure that John has it. Plus, John has another problem. I don't think people like you running against your boss. The big question is, if this guy's so bad that you're running against him, why were you part of it for 2 years? That's a big hurdle to get over.
That is a hurdle. I want to ask you, Mike, because let's turn to Massachusetts and a guy that governed you for several years, Mitt Romney. This, obviously, if he gets in the race, this cuts at Mitt Romney's base in a million different directions. Not only, I mean, these guys, they're bios. I mean, they're both business people, both very wealthy, both Mormons, both going to be moving for sort of the moderate conservative vote. This is very bad news for Mitt Romney.
It's not good news for Mitt Romney because the first thing it does is probably shortstops his fundraising ability, as many people who would be inclined to vote for him or send money to him will now say, well, let's see what Huntsman's going to do.
Right.
So it'll hurt him there. It's funny, watching Governor Huntsman on TV over the past couple of years occasionally, I always get the impression, and now that he's going to resign, that maybe he's just setting things up in his mind for 2016, hoping, off of what you just referred to, that the internal fighting within the Republican Party, with the wing that seems to control the Republican Party right now, might be so bitter, so destructive, that a whole new foundation will be in place when he does decide to run.
And as you guys know, and Mika, as you know, the best way to run for the next election, if you're a Republican, is to run in this election. Because we never let you win the first time.
Conceptually,
you've got to be
very
brutalized
attractive
every time.
candidate.
Yeah.
Very much so.
Governor
Yeah.
Rendell made a really interesting point, though, when he said Huntsman might not be able to get through a primary. Then you have the opposite problem with some of the other candidates who might be conservative enough to win the primaries, but not able to win a general election.
It's a huge problem for Republicans.
Against Obama.
Huge problem for Republicans.
And let me tell you something. He should know, Mika, because he is now a sports columnist at the Philadelphia
That's
Daily
so
News.
cool.
Daily News.
Love it.
Now, have you had your first column yet?
Tomorrow. Published tomorrow.
Tomorrow?
I wrote it.
Philadelphia
I wrote
Daily
it.
News.
We're going to put it in our must-reads. This is
Yes.
big. This is big.
Free food in the
Gosh.
press box.
That's right. But actually, I always go to the game and sit in the
Like a
stand.
true sports
That's the
writer.
reason you did it, isn't it?